The chair was small, not insultingly small. Not small the way a child's chair is small. It was small in the deliberate way the conclave made all human things small. A seat that functioned, but did not honor. A desk that allowed writing, but not influence. A place near the bottom of the chamber where Earth could be present without being relevant. Delegate Mara Voss sat there anyway. Straight back, hands folded. Fuck's calm. 11 years had taught her how to look comfortable inside an insult. Above her, the powers of the galaxy occupied their seats. The Veric Dominion sat highest, draped in red authority, 14 seats wide, with Ambassador Voran speaking only when conquest needed paperwork. Below them moved the Solon Collective, 3 bodies acting with one mind. The Preth Assembly held its ancient silence. 2 gray scholars watching the chamber like they had already seen every civilization rise, boast, rot, and call it policy. And at the lowest tier sat Earth, 1 delegate. 1 vote that almost never mattered. 1 chair built to remind everyone of that fact. The session had been grinding on for hours. Fuel taxes, trade routes, a research boundary dispute. Small revisions to laws that would cost human freighters more money and give human colonies less room to breathe. Mara wrote all of it down. She always wrote it down. 6 notebooks full of small decisions, small humiliations, small thefts wrapped in formal language. Then Voran finally reached the item marked Earth. He did not stand, he barely turned. He spoke about Kepler 7 station, the Brennan habitats, and the Mira agricultural ring as if they were assets on a ledger, instead of places where human beings slept, worked, farmed, and waited for Earth to matter. The Veric Dominion recommended that Earth be reclassified as a protected primitive world, Category 3, in polite conclave language. That meant Earth's outer settlements would stop being disputed and become Dominion property in all but name. There was no gasp, no outrage, no debate. The galaxy did not need drama to erase people. It had forms for that. Voran allowed Mara the standard 3 minutes to respond. She rose from the small chair and walked down to the central floor. Every eye and lens and sensor turned toward her. Most expected protest. Some expected pleading. A few expected nothing at all. Mara gave them none of those. She thanked the assembly for its consideration. She acknowledged the ruling. Then she withdrew Earth's petition. A murmur moved through the chamber. Voran's neck shifted with satisfaction. But before the motion closed, Mara placed 1 printed sheet on the lectern. Actual paper. No encryption, no diplomatic flourish. Just a statement for the permanent registry. Earth accepted the ruling. Earth accepted the reclassification. Earth accepted that it had asked for 11 years and been refused every time. She asked only that the refusal be recorded. That the galaxy remember Earth had come through the proper doors, used the proper language, sat in the proper chair, and been denied by the proper powers. The moderator approved the note. Voran's aide made a quiet sound of amusement. Then Voran murmured the phrase that the open audio captured for every receiver in the room. Earth was the galaxy's footnote. Mara saw the translated words appear on her reader. She looked at him. He had already moved on, so she said quietly, not for the chamber, but loud enough for the nearest Preth scholar to hear. Humans had been called worse. The scholar's ancient face shifted almost invisibly. Not surprise, not amusement. Something closer to recalculation. 40 minutes later, the session ended. Mara took the lower exit, the one near the service corridors, because that was where human delegates were routed. She returned to her small office, with the gray window facing station infrastructure, instead of the atrium gardens. She drank water. She opened the encrypted address she had maintained for 11 years. Updated every 6 months, never used. For a moment she stared at the empty message field. Then she typed 2 words, begin transit. She sent it. After that, she did not write in her notebook. She did not prepare a rebuttal. She did not review the session. For the first time in 11 years, Mara Voss simply sat and looked at the thin slice of stars beyond the station frame. Somewhere beyond every accepted chart, the message arrived. Behind dead moons, inside electromagnetic storms, beneath the sensor noise of unprofitable systems, no one had bothered to map properly. 17 things that should not have existed began to move. They moved without signal, without light, without announcement. They moved like something trained to wait. For 2 centuries, humanity had built without naming what it built. A named thing could be searched. A searched thing could be found. A found thing could be stopped. So the program had no official name. Engineers called it the work. Crews called it the long watch. Some, with the humor of people who live beside impossible pressure, called it the hobby. It was not a hobby. 206 years before Mara signed away nothing she intended to lose. A welder named Tobias Crane, accepted a job he could not describe. His family thought he hauled cargo. In truth, he vanished into a shipyard hidden in the cold shadow of Saturn, one of 17 facilities spread across silent space. He welded a section of hull for 6 years. He never saw the whole ship. That was by design. No worker held the full image. No single leak could reveal the scale. Tobias went home older, quieter, and unable to explain why his hands shook when the news reported another species, absorbed by the Veric Dominion. He died never knowing his work formed part of the forward section of Hull 1. Hull 1 was 12 kilometers long. It was the smallest vessel in the smallest human fleet. Decades later, Admiral Constance Adami was given command of a fleet no public registry admitted existed. She learned that Earth had not been building a navy. It had been building an answer. 17 fleets, hid yards, cold-running warships, crews who lived entire careers under false assignments, and a doctrine that asked one question before every battle plan. What happens the day after victory? Constance forced her officers to study not only how wars were won, but how victories decayed. Fear produced planning. Occupation produced insurgency. Humiliation produced memory. A battle could be won in minutes and lost across generations. So the human fleets trained for something stranger than conquest. They trained to win without creating the next war. If you enjoy stories where humanity turns humiliation into operational doctrine, subscribe, because this is where the small chair stops being small. 3 weeks before Mara sent her message, Admiral Yusef Adami III stood over the full strategic display and saw all 17 fleets rendered together for the first time. The markers took minutes to appear. There were 41,612 ships. Readiness stood at 97.3%. Commander Lena Park stared at the display, long enough to forget whatever professional comment she had prepared. Adami did not smile. He thought of the people who had built what they would never see. He thought of his grandmother's question. He thought of Mara in the Conclave, waiting for the galaxy to say the final wrong sentence. Then his comm chimed. 2 words. Adami straightened. All fleets were ordered to the Galactic Core, Formation Omega. On the display, the blue markers began to move. Not like raiders, not like invaders. Like a tide that had already decided the shape of the shore. The galaxy noticed wrong numbers first. Tiny gravitational variances in dead systems. Mass readings that appeared for seconds and vanished. Sensor ghosts in places where no commerce, colony, or military patrol had any reason to exist. Most operators logged them as calibration drift. That was how massive events entered bureaucratic systems, as maintenance notes. Fleet Commander Skithra of the Veric Dominion was not a superstitious officer. He had commanded in 30 wars. He had won every engagement assigned to him. He trusted models, doctrine, and the clean logic of force. So when 3 anomaly reports arrived from unrelated sectors, he plotted them only to prove they meant nothing. The points formed an arc, a very large arc, too perfect to ignore, too absurd to believe. By day 17, the reports doubled. By day 19, they doubled again. A young listening post technician cross-referenced the ghost signatures with the gravitational variances, and discovered they were not noise at all. They were wakes. Very large objects were moving through space, coordinated objects, converging objects. Skithra requested Preth sensor data under emergency authority. The Preth responded in 40 minutes. That alone made his instincts go cold. Their network was older than several member civilizations. It saw what Veric arrays could not. The data package resolved the ghosts into ships. Not dozens, not hundreds. Wall formations, the Preth classification system identified destroyer masses, cruiser masses, capital masses, and then created a new category because the largest human signatures exceeded anything in the registry. Skithra studied the vectors. Every major trade hub, military installation, and strategic system was being surrounded, not attacked surrounded. The pattern was containment, a hand closing around the known galaxy without crushing it. For the first time in his career, Skithra sat down on his own bridge. He compared the numbers to the entire Veric military inventory. The equation did not favor the Dominion. It did not even respect the Dominion. He ordered Supreme Alert. That alert reached the Conclave station in layers. First the Preth, then the Veric command staff, then the diplomatic channels. Finally the corridors themselves, filling with controlled movement, and voices trying to sound calm while reality changed under their feet. Mara was making tea when the Preth scholar came to her office without knocking. He looked at her with eyes that had watched empires waste centuries. The ships were human, he said. Mara confirmed it. She had been sitting in that chair for 11 years, he said. Signing forms, being refused waiting. Mara confirmed that too. The scholar went silent. It was not shock. It was an old mind rebuilding its map around an inconvenient continent. Then the alarm shifted tone. The fleet signatures were no longer approaching. They were present. Screens across the station went white, then filled with a single text transmission in every recognized language. Admiral Yusef Adami III, commanding the combined human fleet, informed the conclave that humanity was present in full operational capacity. No active weapons, no declared hostility. A formal session was requested. The final line was simple. Humanity wanted new terms. The corridor stopped. Mara stood, took the folder containing the signed reclassification order, and stepped into the hall. The Preth scholar looked at her as if testing an old insult against a new fact. "The footnote," he said. Mamara answered without raising her voice. It had always been more than that. Outside the station, human ships entered visual range. The feed spread everywhere. Delegates who had never bothered to learn the shape of human warships now watched vast black hulls slide out of nothing, disciplined and silent, without one active weapon signature. They did not arrive like conquerors. They arrived like an answer kept in reserve. If you want more HFI stories where patience becomes fire control, subscribe. Because the Dominion is about to learn what restraint looks like at weapons range. The order to fire did not come from Skithra. That was what he would remember. High Command bypassed his console and armed his border fleet directly. 400 Veric ships shifted to combat readiness. Their weapons arrays locked onto the nearest human formation. 47 ships. 47 against 400. Skithra waited for the humans to power weapons. They did not. He waited for them to scatter. They did not. He waited for fear to show itself in movement. Nothing moved. The order came again. Engage. Skithra obeyed. 400 Dominion ships opened fire. Against any other 47 vessels in known space, the first volley would have ended the fight. Energy lances and mass driver rounds crossed the range in a single violent sheet. They struck the human formation and broke apart across the shields like rain hitting a mountain. No hull breach, no formation disruption, no emergency power spike. The shield simply accepted the impact and erased it. Skithra ordered a second volley. The result was the same. Then the human ships moved forward, slowly, cleanly. They closed distance under full bombardment and still did not fire. On Skithra's bridge, officers began speaking in short fragments, not because they lacked training, because their training had no category for an enemy that advanced through fleet-level fire without anger. The human weapons came online at the edge of optimal range. Not before, not after, at exactly the range their doctrine required. Then the 47 ships fired. It was not a volley. It was surgery performed at fleet scale. Each human vessel engaged multiple targets in sequence. Propulsion first. Weapons second. Command disruption only where needed. Skithra's flagship shuddered twice. Consoles flickered. Main drive offline. Maneuvering offline. Weapons offline. Life support green. Across the fleet, the reports matched. No catastrophic breaches. No reactor kills. No mass casualty alarms. 400 Veric ships were disabled in 3 minutes. Alive. Intact. Useless. The human formation stopped outside collision range. They had not advanced for slaughter. They had advanced only far enough to make movement impossible. Then a transmission entered Skithra's crippled bridge. His crew was unharmed. Medical aid and food would arrive within the hour. Repair vessels would restore minimum propulsion within 6. The Veric fleet would be allowed to return under its own power. The humans asked only that they listen. Skithra stood amid the first defeat of his life, and found no doctrine to process it. He had been beaten without being butchered, captured without being humiliated, spared without being dismissed. One of his officers whispered that the humans were sending food. Skithra heard the sentence and understood why it felt more dangerous than the weapons. The humans were not proving they could destroy the Dominion. That would have been simple. They were proving they could decide not to. The Solon Collective observed the engagement from 3 systems away. Their analysts replayed it again and again. 400 ships neutralized, no dead crews, no escalation, no occupied wreckage. The collective understood efficiency when it saw it. The Preth understood history. The smaller powers understood something even more immediate. The Veric Dominion could bleed. More importantly, it could be stopped. By the time the emergency conclave assembled, every ring in the chamber was full. No one placed Mara in the bottom tier. There was no small chair on the speaking floor now. The station administration had rearranged the chamber in panic, and then pretended it had always been flexible. Mara carried her folder to the central lectern. Above her, The same species that had ignored Earth for 11 years watched with complete attention. The signed Category 3 document was still inside, so was a new one. She did not threaten them. She did not raise her voice. She began with facts. Earth's colonies had been placed under Dominion control after 11 years of rejected petitions. Human fleets had entered galactic space without opening hostilities. A Dominion fleet had fired first. Human forces had responded with minimum necessary force and preserved enemy crews. Now Earth was ready to discuss terms. That word moved differently through the chamber than it had 3 weeks earlier. Terms. Not petition, not request. Terms. The negotiations lasted 11 days. They were polite on the surface and absolute underneath. Human leverage sat in every room, without needing to be named. 41,000 ships did not have to threaten anyone. Their existence completed the sentence. Mara led the human delegation with 2 trade law specialists, who had trained inside the hidden program, for exactly this kind of hour. Admiral Adami remained on secure channel from his flagship. He did not intrude. He did not posture. The fleet held formation outside every critical system, and waiting. The galaxy had learned, was something humans did extremely well. The first matter was the simplest. Kepler 7, the Brennan habitats Mira. Mara placed the original reclassification order on the table and slid it to the new Veric representative. Voran was gone by then, removed during the crisis with the speed governments reserved for officials who become evidence. His replacement, Sika Mar, had the exhausted discipline of someone promoted into a fire and determined not to burn stupidly. Mara told her to void the order, not return the colonies, not restore them as a favor, acknowledge that the transfer had never been legitimate. Sika raised infrastructure costs, processing facilities, transit upgrades, agricultural equipment. Mara did not flinch. Earth would buy useful infrastructure at fair market value, assessed by a neutral Preth evaluator. Humanity had not come to punish every pipe and dock the Dominion had installed. It had come to remove Veric hands from human throats. Sika studied her for the shape of a trap. There was none. That made the answer harder, she agreed. On day 3, Mara added 6 more worlds. They were not human. The Veric delegation had expected human demands for human property. They had not prepared for humanity to spend leverage on strangers. 2 Kith mining worlds, a water world called Saren. 3 other systems classified low enough that the old charter had allowed administration to become extraction. Sika objected that these species had not asked Earth to intervene. Mara accepted the point. Then she said Earth was intervening anyway. Not because it gained a base. Not because it gained tribute. Because it had the power to correct a known abuse and had decided that looking away would make the new order worthless before the ink dried. The Preth scholar watched from the edge of the room. During a break, he asked why humans would include worlds that gave them no tactical benefit. Mara poured water and answered plainly. Because they could. Because knowing and doing nothing was also a decision. The scholar said nothing for a long moment. Then he proposed a research exchange between the Preth Assembly and Earth. 4,000 years of Preth observation, for 2 centuries of human science conducted in the dark. For the first time in 11 years, he inclined his head to a human delegate. Not quite a bow. The Preth did not bow, but the chamber noticed. The Solon negotiations were colder, sharper, and full of numbers. Transit fees on human shipping would be recalculated from 0 with no inherited penalties. Closed lanes would reopen. Future trade disputes would be handled by a joint committee, with equal human authority. The collective admitted, in its synchronized way, that a similar arrangement should have been reached years earlier. Mara did not forgive them on command. She simply said it was not all right, but it was done, and the next question was what came after. The collective processed that for 11 seconds. Then it called the approach efficient. For the Solon, that was practically applause. If you like victories where humans win the battlefield and the century after it, subscribe, because this is the part the galaxy never trained for. On day 7, Admiral Adami came aboard the station. He was not towering. He did not wear ceremonial armor. He arrived in a plain uniform, gray at the temples, eyes carrying 3 weeks of command pressure and 3 generations of doctrine. The corridors went quiet as he passed, not because he demanded it, because everyone now understood that the quiet man, walking toward the sealed Preth session, commanded enough force to end the current order, and had chosen to negotiate instead. The meeting lasted 3 hours, no recording was made. When Adami emerged, he looked older. The Preth scholars looked thoughtful, which several aides later described as the closest thing to an alarm they had ever seen from that species. Mara asked what they wanted to know. Adami said the question had been why. Why arrive without firing first? Why feed the disabled Veric crews? Why spend leverage on non-human worlds? Why build doctrine around the day after victory? He told them about Constance Adami. He told them that winning battles was easy compared to living with the consequences. A galaxy ruled by fear was not peaceful. It was merely between wars. Humanity had not built for 200 years just to take its turn being feared. It wanted to break the cycle, or at least make the attempt with enough force behind it that no one could ignore the attempt. The Preth had asked whether he believed it would work. Adami had answered honestly. He did not know, but humanity considered it worth trying. The new charter was completed on the 11th day. It covered sovereignty, trade, colony classification, minimum rights for inhabited worlds, and a council structure where Earth sat at the primary tier beside the Veric Dominion, the Solon Collective, and the Preth Assembly. 14 species signed, the Veric signed last. No banners were raised, no anthem played. That was not the human style. The victory was not in spectacle. It was in the document becoming law. The day after, Lieutenant Dani Reyes waited outside the chamber. She was 23, born in the Brennan habitats under Veric oversight. Her mother had worked 11 years in Dominion processing operations. Rise wore the uniform of Fleet 12, young enough to still carry anger like a sharpened tool, and disciplined enough not to swing it without orders. When Adami emerged, she stepped forward. She told him where she was from. He looked at her, and knew the question before she finished asking. They took their worlds. They called humans primitive. They made her mother labor under their administration. And humanity had answered with meetings. Adami did not hide behind slogans. He said yes, because her mother was alive to hear the habitats were free. Rise held the answer. It was logical. It was humane. It was not enough. Adami did not pretend it was. He simply met her gaze with the hard honesty of command. Not enough and still necessary. That was the shape of the victory. Not clean, not soft, not sentimental. A controlled burn instead of a wildfire. A broken chain instead of a burned city. Reyes returned to her post carrying both truths, because some truths do not cancel each other out. That evening, Mara stayed in her old office. A larger one had been offered on the primary floor. With real windows and real status, she would move eventually. Not that night. She sat at the small desk, under the gray window, and opened the drawer where her personal copy of the reclassification order waited. The paper still held her signature. The insulting category, the official language, the proof that Earth had been named primitive by powers who never looked closely enough to wonder why humanity kept surviving their contempt. She thought of the unnamed workers. Tobias Crane, though she did not know his name. The welders, the navigators. The officers, the families who accepted partial truths so the larger truth could remain hidden. She thought of Constance Adami, teaching young officers that mercy without strength was a wish, but strength without mercy was just another empire. She thought of Yusef Adami admitting to the oldest scholars in the galaxy that humanity did not know if its better answer would work, only that the old answers had failed for centuries. Then her reader chimed. The new charter had been filed. Official. Ratified. Current law of the known galaxy. Plain registry language, the kind once used to reduce Earth to a category. Mara accepted the notification. She did not smile much. That had never been her weapon. She picked up her pen and wrote one final note. They called us a footnote because they thought the story was already written. Outside, the station turned through the same stars. The stars Tobias Crane's daughter had grown up under. The stars Constance Adami had watched from a bridge no registry admitted existed. The stars Dani Reyes had pressed her face against a habitat window to see. Across the galaxy, governments filed new reports. Fleet commanders rewrote doctrine. Species that had once ignored Earth began studying it with urgent precision. The update would be slow. Large systems always resisted new truths. But the truth had arrived in full operational capacity, held its fire, won the field, and wrote new law without becoming the monster it had defeated. The galaxy had misread the footnote. The footnote had been the story all along.